August 2016. I just want to finish up this video on worms. I've got two worms down here. One's a red wiggler, one's an earthworm. And I want to show you what the difference is so you get the right type of worm to compost with. This is an earthworm. If you look at it closely, it's translucent. And if it's left out in the light long enough, it'll become paralyzed. Worm only has one purpose for its brain, and that is to tell it to get out of the light, because they're very sensitive to the light and they can perish and die. Worms don't have any respiratory organs. They breathe through their skin. So you can put one in a bucket of water. As long as you're providing oxygen to that bucket, it can live for days. It's not going to drown. But they die, they suffocate when they dry out, and they also suffocate when they're in water when there's no oxygen. Now let's take a look at the red wiggler. If we look at it, it's got a deep color red, and if you can get close enough, you can actually see like little stripes around it, and they're sometimes called tiger worms. And this is the head next to my thumb, and the way you can tell is it's got a little ring around its neck, and that's the reproductive organs. They keep eggs in there. They look like little tiny lemons, and they hold 2 to 8 worms, and they can stay dormant for months long after the worms have perished, and when the conditions are right, then they'll hatch and you'll have a new bunch of worms to keep your worm bin populated. I don't suggest trying to compost with an earthworm, because number one, by nature it's a wanderer. It always wants to move. So why do you want to try to contain something that always wants to go, always wants to leave? However, a red wiggler will be more than happy to stay in your organic material as long as you keep the temperature between 40 degrees and 80 degrees. You don't overfeed it. You give it a moist bedding where it's about 60 to 70% moisture rate, because they constantly need fluid to breathe. They're nothing but liquid tubes, and without liquid they suffocate. In the dry air they suffocate. And so you want to make sure their bedding is wet, and the way you can tell if it's right is you just squeeze the newspaper or the straw or the leaves, and when a couple drops of water come out, then that's just perfect for them. So again, we want to do our composting with red wigglers. You can usually buy them on Craigslist for I don't know, usually $20 to $25 a pound, at least in Washington State. And if you give them a good home, they'll reproduce, and they can live for up to 5 years in captivity. So other than that, I just like to say keep the salt away from them, because that's hazardous to the microorganisms in the soil. No sodium, no salt. It dries them out. A dry worm's a dead worm. So this is Kevin wishing you well, and I'm going to take these worms and put them back in their environment and get them wet and make them happy again. Wishing you well. Last example of what a baby red wiggler looks like. Let's look at my hand here. See if we can't focus. There's a couple little red wigglers down there, and they must have just came out of an egg, because they're actually a little smaller than this when they hatch. So this is probably a day old or 2 days old, I'm not sure. But they're tiny little suckers, and they can crawl through screens. They can crawl through that weed blocking fabric that I showed you earlier, that I put on the bottom of the trays to keep them from falling into the leachate. But this is how big they are when they come out of the eggs, and there's usually 2 to 10 of them when they hatch, and they grow kind of quick. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how small these things are when they're hatched.